This is the Analysing Anfield podcast on the Blood Red channel, bringing you the best tactical and statistical analysis of Liverpool FC.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm joined as ever by David Hughes. How are we doing, mate?
I'm very good, thanks Josh. How are you?
I'm good as well. But we must immediately address last week in terms of the audio. Apologies, we know what happened. I was reassured that we were over it and we upgraded the mics and all that sort of stuff. Thought that was the issue, it wasn't. So last week we know there were some audio problems. We have addressed it and it really, definitely this time, should not happen again. It happened in a pretty bad episode considering Thiago and Jota, but as I said, it shouldn't happen again. But this week, we may encounter a slight issue because I'm currently working at home in a house that's currently getting stuff done to it in terms of decorations and all that sort of stuff. So there might be a bit of noise, ignore it. Everyone's okay. But we'll press on anyway. So hopefully...
Sorry Josh, can I just add on that obviously what Josh is saying there is completely true. Like, it's been something we've been working on for a few months now in terms of improving the audio. We've upgraded all the equipment, and last week had nothing to do with it. It was basically internet issues on a stand-in producer. Not to throw them under the bus, but I'm sure they won't mind. I think they were using dial-up rather than broadband. But so anyway, long story short, we never normally ask this, but a few people kind of give it the show a 1-star review on the back of that, and it hurt our producer guy's feelings, shall we say. So, if you do enjoy the show, can you leave nice reviews and 5 stars if possible this time, just to make up for last week. We never ever asked that before, but as I said, I think Guy took it to heart a little bit. So but as Josh said, it shouldn't happen again.
Yeah, it was internet issues, it was lagging problems, and it shouldn't happen again, it won't happen again. So we should be at good quality studio standard now moving forward, which is good. And we're going to talk today about the Arsenal game. We're going to look ahead to Aston Villa. And we're going to have a little look at the state of play at the minute, because a few games have been played. And although the window isn't shut yet, shuts in 5 days, I think, there's probably enough there for us to go at in terms of just general shouts sort of thing. So, yeah, we'll come to that. But firstly, the Arsenal game, Dave. Impressed?
Yeah, definitely. Wow, yeah. No, if you kind of look at it now, I know we'll get into the specifics of Arsenal, but it could have potentially been a bit of banana skin. Arsenal have caused Liverpool a few problems in the last couple of months. But you look now with that victory, Liverpool basically had 3 kind of dominant wins against sides who are good sides. Leeds United proven to be a good side. Chelsea away, tough game on paper. Liverpool dominant, and now Arsenal at home. Like they're kind of 3 tough games and 3 dominant performances, and more importantly, 3 wins.
Yeah, I mean, I did say before the start of the season that I had a feeling that maybe Liverpool wouldn't be as relentless at the start of this season in terms of picking up points. And I thought that maybe after about 8 games, considering the start Liverpool had, the lack of pre-season, and at the time, the lack of signings Liverpool had made, I actually thought that after about 8 games, Liverpool may be playing catch-up. Obviously not going to be the case. Liverpool have started really strongly, probably the most impressive team so far. We look like a team that doesn't really have any sort of weakness, doesn't look in any way happy with the silverware that's already been achieved. After the first, say, 8 games or so, Liverpool might have been playing catch-up a little bit, purely because of the lack of pre-season. Liverpool hadn't made any signs at that stage. And the start was obviously quite tricky. We played Chelsea away. We played Arsenal at home. I thought Leeds was a tricky start too. And we've got a few tricky games coming up. Villa away is quite hard, I think. So I thought Liverpool would be playing catch-up, but I've just been immediately really impressed by Liverpool's start. We look quite imperious, with really few weaknesses. And I think it was shown in the Arsenal game, really. I think it was pretty much dominant from start to finish, I thought. The expected goals on the day, 3, bang on 3 for Liverpool, against 1.2 for Arsenal. 21 shots to 4, and 67% possession dominated by Liverpool. So I think those numbers pretty much put it into perspective, don't they?
Yeah, 100%. Especially when you also consider that one of Arsenal's shots was through a defensive error. Robertson's, that obviously leads to the goal. And then another one you could probably say should have been offside.
I was going to say it's difficult to put a number on the ones that were offside and the ones that weren't.
Yeah, I think we're going to have that problem this year, aren't we?
Yeah, well, I think Klopp said post-match, something that I wasn't actually aware of, I hadn't even thought about. If a move is offside, but the linesman doesn't flag, does he? But if a move's offside and it develops and it goes out for a corner, the corner's still given, even if the attacker's offside. That's flawed, that for me, like.
Yeah, well, the same you've just said is something I was going to say. I think it is flawed, because then if that corner results in the goal, then obviously that's defeats the purpose. I think it should have. We don't talk about this stuff because it's for everywhere else. But just briefly, I think they should have just kept it the same, and that you flag if you're pretty sure it's offside. Like, I could understand if it's right on the money and it is really difficult and they have to start bringing lines out. But for example, Lacazette's first chance, that was obviously offside, and I think a capable lines person sees that's offside. So that one could have been flagged easily.
Yeah, I mean, we don't ever usually do this because I don't like talking about referees and stuff like that, but I like focusing on the performance of the actual football. But just on the Mane incident, inside, like, I don't know, 90 seconds or whatever it was, what did you think of that? Because I actually thought we were really lucky with that. I mean, there'll be people listening to this now probably screaming at their phone or at the screen or whatever, saying, it was fine and that. And it's obviously a matter of opinion. It's the idea behind it. But me personally, when I saw it back, specifically in slow motion, I was worried.
Yeah, I'd agree. I wasn't sure if you were going to lead it down the path to being like it was a correct decision, but I mean, I wouldn't even say it was definitely a red. I just think it was.
It's from the perspective of some people, it would be a correct decision. It's not.
Yeah.
It's one of those that's an orange card, really, almost. But I think.
Yeah. I think it was just dangerous, wasn't it? I think. I wouldn't say he's definitely gone to elbow him in the face. No, he's not that type of player. But...
I think he's expected contact. I think he's expected someone to be right on top of him. But it does look like he's gone towards him with his wrist, with his elbow.
Yeah, because that's kind of Mane's thing, isn't he? He's so strong, and to kind of hold off players. I'm not saying Tierney's the best example, but to hold off players who are physically bigger profiles. He kind of does this where he uses arms and can't, low sense of gravity, the way he moves and things. And 9 times out of 10, that would have just resulted in him kind of stiff arming and keeping the defender away. But yeah, I just think it was almost like a series of unfortunate movements that leads to basically a stiff armed elbow in the face. And as I said, I don't for 1 second think he's meant to elbow him in the face, and maybe that's why the referee and the VAR team or whatever you call them have opted not to give the red card because you can't understand. But yeah, I agree. I think it was also a little bit fortunate as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial aggression that he showed probably summed up Liverpool's approach throughout the day. Really, it was really aggressive, high risk, assertive sort of thing, dominating the pitch. Pretty much what we've done the past few times we've met Arsenal at Anfield. We did it last year with Unai Emery's Arsenal. We just completely penned them in for the entire game. I said it last week, I think, when we were previewing it, they played a midfield diamond, I think, but one that was basically collapsed into a block. They allowed Trent and Robertson freedom to flanks. This approach was a little bit different. It wasn't a diamond and stuff like that. It was probably a little bit better suited to causing Liverpool issues, but Liverpool was just too good for them issues to emerge, really. I think from the perspective of Arsenal, they seem to have one main attacking channel, really, and that was to build from the back, even though Liverpool were going quite relentless. to build from the back, at least one time beat the press, and then when you beat the press, you're kind of in on Liverpool's last line, and the idea would be for Aubameyang probably to finish a move exactly how they did in the Community Shield, when I think the ball's played to Bellerin on the flank, Bellerin plays it down the line to Saka, Saka switched the place to Aubameyang, and Aubameyang scored. I think this time around it looked like they were focusing on Liverpool's on their right, on their left a little bit more, down the side of Trent and Salah, trying to build using Tierney and then Aubameyang, but you know, it didn't really work, did it?
No.
Even though it's probably one of the few actually, you know, attacking tactics you can come up with to actually get at Liverpool at Anfield. I mean, there's not a wealth of options there, really, is there?
No. There's two things really from that. I think, firstly, it's probably worth pointing out how even though it was a 3-1 game and it did look precarious at times in the second half when it was poised at 2-1 and Lacazette has that chance, you know, it was very much based on the XG and those shots for and against. It could have been, you know, 5 or 6 really on another day, especially if you consider that when Liverpool beat Chelsea last season 5-2, the XG in that game was about 1.4 or something, wasn't it, for Liverpool? And it just shows that when Liverpool are really efficient in front of goal, you know, they can get a half full, and they probably could have in this game, but didn't quite work out like that. But yeah, in terms of the attack, it does feel like it's kind of, for me, I think Liverpool, the best chance you've got of scoring against them is beating the line and getting the kind of clear cut 1-on-1. But it's just so hard to achieve it that it's kind of, I don't know how to articulate this point. It's, if you can get it right, it's, you know, it's good and it tends to be a high quality chance, but it's just so hard to get right that's why so many teams struggle.
Yeah.
Because that's all they really focus on.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually when you're saying that, because it made me think of the exact approach that Leicester used maybe against City on the Sunday, I think it was, and you could argue it was pretty similar in terms of sitting in like a mid to low block sort of thing, and hoping to, when you get the ball, play through the press, get onto the last line, and hopefully get the odd clear-cut chance every 20 minutes maybe, while being dominated. And I think that you could argue Leicester are maybe a little bit better than Arsenal are at the minute, but I think the difference in how Liverpool coped with that high-risk defending in comparison to City, not just Liverpool's last line in comparison to City's last line, but the system as a whole, Liverpool just look a lot more watertight to me, a lot more... there's no better word for that, really. There's no leaks, there's no holes. I mean, Arsenal did get through once. It was a good move, actually. Xhaka's pass was great. Lacazette plays it off immediately with his first touch, I think, and he actually scored from it, albeit from a Robertson mistake. And then it bounces over Alisson, unfortunately, but, you know, all that sort of stuff just comes together. So you could argue that they maybe wouldn't have scored that if it was to materialise, you know, 9 other times. It was one of them that was just 1 time out of 10 and ended up going in the net. But just a comparison to City, which we're going to do towards the end of the podcast anyway, but I think the comparison there and how difficult it is to pen a team in for virtually 90 minutes, it is really, really hard. And I think that's why Klopp at the end of the match had a little bit of a go at Roy Keane, I think, just simply because Keane mentioned that, you know, in a few moments Liverpool were a little bit sloppy. But this was part of my point against Leeds in terms of when you're playing such a high-risk game and you're playing against good quality attackers and that, you can't expect to be in complete control for 90 minutes. You know, there's going to be the odd moment. And even the odd moment that Arsenal had, they weren't particularly big, really.
No, it's a really good point. And I think what Liverpool are doing and have done for a while is, you know, you're talking about that the highest tier of football, by the way, at the Premier League. It's, you know, it's arguably the best league in the world, and Liverpool are competing at the very top of it. And on that basis, I think it's virtually impossible to expect a team to not concede any chances every week. Doesn't matter who you're playing. It's just you're playing the best footballs from across the world, so it's going to happen. But I think what Liverpool do really well is they're so they restrict shots to such a low amount. I mean, what is it over the last 3 games? I'm sure I made a note of it.
Well, I'm just checking now, actually, the shots against this season that teams are averaging.
But whilst we have a look at that, I'm pretty sure it was only 4 against Chelsea and Arsenal. Now, you know, a lot of dominant sides and the best sides tend to win games by taking the most shots and therefore having the best chance of converting them into goals. But what Liverpool is saying to the opposition is, you know, we're not going to give you many shots, we might only give you 1 or 2. And then they're putting the pressure on the opposition to convert those 1 or 2 chances. And that's kind of what we saw with Lacazette in the second half. You know, everyone talked about how that was a kind of big chance, but it was really, I know he scored earlier on as a result of a defensive mistake. But if we disregard the offside one, that was his kind of biggest chance really in the game. And the pressure's on to convert it. You know, he probably, even like as he's running on goal, he's about to take that chance. In these kind of microseconds, he's probably thinking, I'm not going to get another one here, I need to score it. And all that just, I think, weighs on an attacker's kind of behaviours and the decision-making. That's what Liverpool do really well, restrict your shots, and they put so much pressure on the ones that the teams do create that they struggle to convert them.
Yeah, well, if you think of the actual shot that Lacazette does take, he does kind of scuff it a little bit. He doesn't really connect with it particularly well. It's just a case of, with Alisson already being on his way down, it just unfortunately bounces over him. But I don't think Lacazette means to finish like that.
No, and the second one, the finish isn't good on that either. It looks like he's torn between trying to chip and just somewhere in between. And, you know, Alisson does well to stay up, but he also makes it easier for him, I think.
Yeah, so in terms of the Premier League then, so shots faced per match, obviously with 3 games in, shouldn't really be doing this, but Liverpool so far, 3 games in, playing good attacking teams as well, are facing an average of 4.4 shots per match. The next best, funny enough, is Brighton, only 6.3 faced per match, and then Everton 7.1. City will probably go towards the top of that list as the season progresses, just because that's the way they play. You don't get many shots against City, and when you do, they're quite clear cut. But as you said there, it's similar with Liverpool in terms you don't get many shots against Liverpool, but the big difference is when you do get shots, they're not easy in comparison to City. They're quite difficult to convert. But yeah, just more on the Arsenal game then. So we have to have a little word on Van Dijk. I think a lot of people came away from the game. I don't know why, because he's already elite as far as I'm concerned, but a lot of people came away from it impressed with Van Dijk's his game on the ball, in possession. Arteta spoke about it after the match. I'll get the quote up in a sec. But yeah, I mean, did he take your attention at all? Because I think he was certainly used by Liverpool on the day. I think I thought myself during the game that Liverpool went a bit longer than usual, quite often.
But then, you know, that's the way to bypass teams trying to cut off your passing options, isn't it? Within defence. Look, and I mean, we've raved about Van Dijk so much on this show, probably more than in other places. And it goes back to those kind of terms that we've used when we've said, you know, Liverpool a little bit like a Swiss Army knife. They've got kind of multiple ways to get at you, and it felt like in a different way, articulated a little bit differently. That felt like what Arteta was saying. You know, Arteta was saying we had a game plan. You know, we wanted to cut off certain passing lanes. We wanted to press in a different way, or press within different ways. But the problem was, you know, they go one way, they cut off one option, and Van Dijk would just pull out like a 40-yard ball up to the attackers. That was, you know, on the money, you know, perfectly executed. And Arteta a little bit was kind of shrugging his shoulders, as in like, you know, what more could we have done? You know, we couldn't have done it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just trying to get up his passing network here, but I'll work on that in a sec. But the quote that he said was, so they have different weapons when you go to the opposite side, as in up Liverpool's end of the pitch, and do a high press perfect. They have Van Dijk, and he plays a 60-yard pass into Salah's chest, and they are out. That's quality. I thought it was a really interesting little quote because it does kind of offer insights into what you've just said, as in from an opposition perspective, it can be to the extent that you do high press perfectly as a team, you do something perfect, and Liverpool still have a solution, if you like, an answer. And those that listened to the podcast last week when we were speaking about Thiago and stuff, I referenced Thiago quite frequently as a solution, a problem solver sort of thing. Liverpool have been really, really good over the years at just consistently adding problem solver after problem solver. And Van Dijk, although he's deemed to be a problem solver in terms of the defensive side of the game, he offers Liverpool solutions in possession as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. He does. I think it spoke volumes that after the game, Arteta, for me, is quite ambitious, and he doesn't hold back if he's not happy with the performance or a defeat. I've seen it a lot in his kind of short spell as a manager at Arsenal, but there was almost just an acceptance. There didn't seem to be any sort of grievance with the result at all. He didn't even seem disheartened after his team getting beat. It was kind of, I think he knew deep down, he was like, well, our game plan was spot on. We didn't really do anything wrong. It's just, sadly, there's nothing you can do to stop Liverpool when they're performing like this, and when the likes of Van Dijk pulls 60-yard passes into chests. There's nothing you can do.
No, I totally agree. Can you see what I've shared?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so that's his passing network from the day. As you can see, a lot of diagonal passes in the direction of Mohamed Salah down here. But I think he's also prone, maybe with a bit less succession, to doing these to Mane on his own side. Really, that's the side that he typically plays on the left, Van Dijk. But he's capable of playing those over the top. So if you press Van Dijk to the left, he's playing one of the types of passes to Mane or Salah. If you press him to the right, he's playing the opposite side. So it's just about those solutions. That pass to Mane, we actually seen, against Bayern Munich a few years back in the Champions League. Obviously, it resulted in Liverpool opening the scoring against Bayern away from home, when Mane kind of lobbed Manuel Neuer. And yeah, it's just I think Lindis was speaking about Thiago last week, and he said one quote that I specifically liked that he said is that we want players in all positions that can play the last pass. I thought that was really, really interesting quote, because I wrote a piece for Liverpool.com a while back on like the concept of Liverpool and signing just dangerous players. No matter where they are on the pitch, they have to have attacking qualities. They have to be dangerous. Even Alisson, Van Dijk, left back, right back, Fabinho, defensive midfielder. He scored 2 goals from 30 yards for Liverpool, and he's prone to playing them little dinked passes over defensive lines. Liverpool have got just dangerous players all over the pitch, and that last line quote, I think, sums up what Liverpool have created and the problem with Van Dijk, really. Just the last thing on the Arsenal game then that I want to touch on was the high line stuff. You actually tackled this a little bit, didn't you, Dave? I thought your offside numbers were really interesting. I thought that's not something I thought to look at. So I'm not sure if you want to reel them off now, for those that haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe what I'm going to do is I'll bring up the visualization for people watching on YouTube, but I'll also talk through it. So people who are just listening, let me just present ourselves. Yeah, so basically what I did was, because this kind of debate's been going on for a while now, hasn't it? Can you see that okay, Josh? Yeah. So this debate's been going on about the high line for a while. Like, I remember last year, obviously ourselves, we kind of...
Yeah, I was going to say that then, yeah.
Yeah, for Liverpool.com, where we, all contributed and, give our opinion on it. But there does seem to be a theme that kind of Liverpool have brought it in again. It's suddenly brand new again, and it's on the back of Bayern's success, or Bayern doing it, and that isn't the case.
Total nonsense.
Yeah, so I looked into it anyway, and Liverpool had roughly 141 offsides for last season. So that's a free kick awarded as a result of an offside. That worked out roughly around 3.71 per 90. It was 52 more than Bayern, who obviously deploy this high line as well, and then 42 more than any other Premier League side. And as I said, if you break it down to a per 90 basis, Liverpool are getting roughly, this was as of last season, but we'll touch on this season in a second. They're getting roughly around 3.71 offsides per 90 in their favour. Bayern, it's about 2.62. Then bizarrely, West Ham, 2.61. And then Man City, 2.11, who also play a high line. But it's interesting that even with the, delayed flagging for offside this season, based on the 3 games so far, Liverpool on course to hit roughly 139 offsides for a game this season. So I think what that really kind of captures, I did say on here, is, sometimes it does look bad to watch and it looks like they're giving away big chances. But the reality is that it just highlights, how effective it is, especially when, that VAR is obviously going to capture any offsides or, attack astray. And so that just really, I guess, was me trying to capture just how effective this high line is. And, basically, don't forget, every time you win a free kick, you've pulled possession back to your team and you can then set the team up again to basically attack.
Yeah, I remember us speaking about this last year on the pod. I think it was quite a few episodes, to be honest. There was just a big question mark attached to whether Liverpool are playing a high line and all this sort of stuff. And I remember using offside numbers really early in the season, like the first 5 games, just to capture how we were getting more offside decisions than last season. Maybe that offers an insight into the high line stuff. I don't specifically think Liverpool's line is higher. It's just a case of, like, in certain moments, I thought that we were a bit less reluctant to retreat and to drop off, and instead we were pushing forward to catch a few players offside, sort of thing. But, you're spot on there, really interesting numbers. This is from an Opta piece that I've read recently. It says, so Liverpool have the highest average sequence start line of any team in the Premier League this season at 58 metres from their own goal. Again, just a little bit of a number there that offers a further insight into Liverpool's tendency to be aggressive and be high risk, really, but they've got the players, crucially the defensive players, and the watertight system to do it without being punished as frequently as Man City, for example. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Yeah. So we'll move on to Aston Villa. Any general thoughts on Villa, Dave? Any general thoughts on, whether this is a tricky opponent, whether this is an easy win, whatever?
Without skipping to predictions at this stage, I will say that I think it's interesting that they're still undefeated, but the minute you kind of scratch beyond the surface, you think they've played one less game from an already small sample size of 3 for everyone else. So they played 2 games, and I think it's really difficult to win 2 back-to-back games in the Premier League, irrespective of opposition. But for me, at least anyway, they've played 2 of the maybe worst teams in the division, in Fulham and Sheffield United. People might be kind of shocked at me saying Sheffield United, but I just think they look a little bit lost so far this season. And yeah, I think that they've played 2 of the worst teams. Admittedly, they've won, but I do think it's going to be a different story this weekend coming up against Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I think Fulham are the worst team in the league, comfortably. And I think against Sheffield United had 10 men for some of the game. I think it was most of it, actually, because I had John Egan in my fantasy. And even with 11 men, Sheffield United, particularly on the attacking side, are very, very shy. I think they took the fewest shots in the league last season. Most of their results, positive results, originate from clean sheets. So if you score first against them, you're pretty much you're not going to be okay, but you're in the driving seat certainly. But yeah, it's 2 wins from 2, despite only playing twice. They're actually 4th in the table with 6 points, and the reason they're 4th in the table is because the goal difference is +4, yet to concede. But again, for me, they've played the worst team in the league, although Fulham can attack to an extent, and Sheffield United do can't attack. And they've got the lowest expected goals against in the league so far, total. But again, they played 1 fewer game. Even with an extra game played, though, their expected goals against is quite good. I think they've only been expected to concede so far after 2 matches, a total of 1.6 goals, I think. But I'd expect them to concede at least 1.6 against Liverpool alone.
Yeah.
But the defence, I do think since lockdown, to be honest, since the restart, the defence does seem to be a bit more transformed. We've got a new goalkeeper as well. I think it's a right back, Matty Cash.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a bit of improvement there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I actually, for the Analytics 5's newsletter, and just after the lockdown, the post-lockdown fixtures ended, so basically when the season finished, I did look into Villa's defensive numbers, and they did definitely improve, maybe with a bit more. I feel like it was a good period to coach during that lockdown, so they obviously must improve on the training pitch, because in about a 10-game sequence, Villa faced 7 of the teams who finished in the top half of the table, and you can see that just 11 goals, which was obviously less than Liverpool, but it was a little bit different circumstances for Liverpool. But yeah, the expected goals against and their post-shot expected goals against numbers, on a per 90 basis, dramatically decreased compared to the season averages. I think for XG against it, they were averaging around 1.97 per 90. For post-shot XG against, it was 1.67. But then in this period, after lockdown, expected goals against went to just 0.85, and I think post-shot expected goals against went down to 0.99. So it's effectively knocking off like a goal per game that they were expected to concede. So definite improvements, and they do look a better side defensively.
Yeah, and in addition to that, as I said, they've signed a new goalkeeper who I've looked at quite a bit simply since the few starts he got for Arsenal, and his numbers look good. Have you actually checked him, Dave?
I think I had a glance at Arsenal, but in terms of what he's done so far, I think I checked this morning, he's only faced 3 shots. So although they were 2 really good saves, one was a penalty and one kind of tipped one onto the bar. But yeah, you might have to fill me in on his Arsenal numbers.
Yeah, no, last season, I can't remember how many games he played exactly, but he overperformed in them by a total of 4 goals, I think 4.2 goals or something like that. And I think if you was to extrapolate those numbers over the course of 38 matches, it would have been an overperformance if he kept the same standard at least of 12 goals. And that would have been enough to place him top of the Premier League. The person with the most overperformance, I think, was Martin Dubravka at Newcastle. I think he overperformed by 10. So Emi Martin is based on his very short sample size. I think it was about 9 games, maybe something like that. He overperformed by 4.2 goals, I think it was, and would have been 12 over the course of the season. So I'm intrigued to see how he does this season. At Villa with a full 38-game campaign. I mean, I watched him the other day against Fulham, and he was lucky, to be honest. He fumbled one right in front of, in the goal mouth, and it got put in, but it got taken back for a Mitrovic foul. I wasn't too sure that it was a foul. It's the first mistake I've seen him make, though, since he started getting games in the Premier League. So that's probably one to watch, considering Liverpool's finishing, Liverpool's attack. Emi Martin is facing endless shots, probably. Liverpool are averaging about 19 a game, I think. Just in terms of shots per 90, actually, what teams are averaging? Villa are averaging the joint second most with 15 per 90. But I think this captures basically, I don't really know what to make of Villa at the minute. I feel really uncomfortable predicting how Villa are going to do because their start has been really, really easy. They've only played 2 games. They've had a window that we're going to get to that I think is decent. 15 shots per 90 is great. Their expected goals against is great. But you just don't know, do you? There's a big question mark there for me still. We need more games, I think, with Villa.
Yeah, that's it. It's certainly in their case. I mean, it's hard to make any concrete assumptions at this stage anyway. But especially when we're talking about a team who have played 1 game less, I have to agree. I think they look good now, but given the opposition they faced, I'm inclined to. As I said, I think it'll be so different against Liverpool. As Martinez, for example, we're trying to gauge how good he is. He's only faced 3 shots on target in 2 games. Against Liverpool, he probably faced down the first 20 minutes. And that actually leads on to a bigger point of I wonder how he'll do being a lot busier because he was obviously extremely busy. Villa tended to concede a lot of shots last season. Certainly before lockdown, they conceded by far the most. It'll be interesting to see if they get anywhere near that again, how he copes with that kind of quantity. But yeah, I agree. I think we don't know anything about Villa yet. It's going to be an interesting game on Sunday, shall we say.
Yeah, I was going to say that this could maybe act as the acid test, but maybe I wouldn't even say that. I don't even think it's the acid test because it's Liverpool at the end of the day. You would expect to lose even if you play well. The acid tests will be in the next few weeks probably, but yeah, I think Villa have. Put it this way, I'd be surprised if they're in for the same fight for survival again. And if they finished maybe as high as 9th, 10th, I don't think I'd be that surprised. But they could also finish 15th. I mean, last season they did have the worst defence in the league for most of the season. They had no attack whatsoever. We might as well touch on the window that they've had now. They've signed Ollie Watkins, Burton, Traore, Matty Cash and Emi Martinez for about 75 million according to Transfer Market, which is, for me, a bit much. But at the same time, for me, those are 4 hits that I don't think you have to go and buy. Say, for example, I think they signed Samatta in January. You buy a player like that, they're buying another striker 6 months later. They bought Wesley last summer. I know we got injured, but they bought a striker again 6 months later. So I think although they've overpaid a little bit for those 4 players, I don't think they'll have to buy another striker, another right back, another goalkeeper for a few seasons now. Which tells me that it should be a good window then, even though they've paid a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a little bit less risk as well. You think Watkins has been doing it efficiently in the Championship. So you think even if he can't replicate the numbers he was doing in the Championship, if he does even, a half or 2/3 of that, then he's going to prove to be a good forward. Traore, I think he had 10 goals and assists last season, didn't he, at Lyon, which is decent output. Maybe a little bit more risk with him, but you'll see. Cash looks really good. I think he could have went to a number of clubs. And then we've already touched on Martinez. Obviously, as well, just before we come on, they've signed Ross Barkley as well on loan for the season.
I was going to ask you about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a fairly good move for them, actually, because, although Barkley does have some flaws, what's he good at? He's good at progressing the ball. I felt like Grealish was weighed down a lot with those responsibilities last year. You're going to have Barkley in there who can kind of carry the ball for you through the middle, through the lines. He's also, he's got good technical ability as well. So whilst his decision making can be a little bit off sometimes, he does tend to create chances for you. I think he's got a good physical profile through the middle as well. So I think he's actually a good move on loan. So I'd probably throw him in as another kind of decent move for Villa, in what looks to be a decent window.
Yeah, the standard of signing that they've got in this window just feels a lot better than last year. Last year they just seemed to sign a load of no marks, really. I mean, they needed to. They didn't have a squad, so I understood why they did it. And this season, it feels like they've had a year in the Premier League and now got an opportunity to buy Premier League quality. And they're doing it for me. Even Traore, he spent time at Chelsea. He knows English football.
Sure.
Quite a success at Lyon, I thought. A decent player. I think he was linked with a few clubs. They were linked with Rashica, actually. Did you see that?
Already, yeah, from Germany.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned him on the show once or twice. The Werder Bremen attacker, but they ended up going for Traore in the end.
I think there was a kind of universal agreement that because he stayed up, he kind of... I mean, I don't know, is he still moving, actually? I don't know, but I think that kind of... He went from being, if he went down, being a kind of easy, play to probably purchase, to then just being a little bit more difficult because he was staying up.
Yeah. No, I think you make a good point on Barkley there as well. To be honest, he comes across a little bit similar to John McGinn in terms of the profile and stuff. Bit of a little bit less all action than McGinn, but it's similar in terms of his ball carrying, all that sort of stuff. Being able to carry Villa to the final third, being a bit of a threat from long range, all that sort of stuff.
I agree. I think he's a good. I do think he's a good move. I don't know if he'll play on Sunday. I don't know. What do you reckon? Could be a little bit too soon. Then again, he did come on against Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, didn't he?
He's never a nice presence either. When he plays against Liverpool, he's always trying to put a foot in and injure someone.
Well, that's the thing is I don't know how he's still a staunch Evertonian apparently, isn't he? So it always seems to be a big game, and obviously he kind of... A lot was made about the fact he scored in the FA Cup game, didn't he, when Chelsea beat Liverpool earlier in the year. So I think he does always have that kind of, extra motivation, which is bizarre because he's pretty much universally unliked at Goodison Park these days, but I think he's still trying to cling. I actually remember being at an Everton game just quickly, and he'd been booed the whole game for Chelsea. And as he got subbed off, he started giving a round of applause to the home fans, as if former players do when they've had a fantastic reception. And I think he's living in denial a little bit. But yeah, he could be a little bit of a thorn in the side on Sunday that Liverpool need to just keep quiet.
So predictions for that one then?
Still really, I can't see anything but a Liverpool win. I don't think it'll be as tight as last season's. That's the kind of two late goals to make it 2-1. I think you're maybe looking at 3-0.
Okay. This is a weird one for me because Villa, in my opinion, are a lot stronger than when we last went to Villa Park. But I think Liverpool will remember that game. And I think Liverpool will go into this game really focused, knowing that it was really tough once we went a goal behind. So I think Liverpool will win 2-0. Because they will turn up with absolute focus that we've seen against Arsenal and against Chelsea, even though this is now Villa. I think Liverpool will really turn up. And I think Villa will, as I said, cause maybe even more of a threat than last season. But yeah, it'll be a tricky game. It'll be interesting to see how Villa go, but I just fancy Liverpool to be really on it because of what happened last season. So for the last 15 minutes, I think, because we're getting notifications from the producer. So for the last 15 minutes, maybe a bit of a shorter pod, but the current state of play in terms of the title, the league, all that sort of stuff. Any general thoughts after the first 2 or 3 games, depending on the team? Plenty of signings have now happened. We'll probably address it again next week a little bit if something mad happens, like say, United get Sancho or something like that. But yeah, how are things looking?
I think just on the signings point, what I will say is it does feel like there's been a lot of quality brought into the division, and not just by top teams. I mean across the board, easy one, Thiago. I think he's a good signing. James Rodriguez looks a really good signing. You've got Castellani, is it pronounced at Leicester?
Yeah. Castagna, something like that.
Yeah, Castagna. Gabriel Arsenal, Chelsea have brought. I know it hasn't quite worked for them just yet. They've got Werner, Havertz, Ziyech. Then you've got, United brought Van der Beek, who could do well. I'm probably missing about another 10 there, to be honest, Josh. But it does feel like a lot of good players have come to the division this summer, which is which is going to be quite good to see and make it a lot more competitive.
So, in my opinion, right, in terms of the current standard in the league and all that sort of stuff, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I really don't. But I feel really, really confident in saying that I think Liverpool are going to win the league. And I think it could be another that's kind of sewn up by, well, early. I'm not going to put a number on it. I'm not going to put a month on it.
I put March on it.
You put March on it, yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't want to get ahead of myself on that, but just the way the season started, and specifically the transfers that have been made by Liverpool and City, I think Liverpool will go pretty unfazed for the season.
I agree, yeah. And, you know, we spoke about it. We're in a chat with me, you and Christian, aren't we? OG Christian. And naturally, Christian's forever the pessimistic, despite Liverpool being, you know, what they are now. He's still always convinced that they're going to get beat by like Burnley at home and things. So he's not convinced, but we basically echoed the same thing between us, didn't we, Josh? Where I can't not see Liverpool win the league. They're at very least odds-on favourites for me, based on how the season started. You know, City are already going to be 3 points behind Liverpool after, you know, they've played one less game, I think, haven't they? But even so, they're still going to be 3 points behind, probably already 3 games in. I think the recruitment hasn't been as good. I think there's a lot of holes to be picked in their side. I think Liverpool look completely faultless at the moment. So then you're looking at who else in the league. It's clear now that Chelsea aren't going to be challengers. It is going to be a transition season for them. United still look out of sorts. Spurs aren't going to be up there. Arsenal, you know, Leicester will probably be top 4-ish again. I think Everton might be, yeah. Well, you know, I think Everton will be maybe top 6, you know, based on what I've seen so far. But again, they're not going to win the league. So you're like, who's going to stop Liverpool? I think the only thing that would stop them is if they just fell off a cliff. Because as a lot of people pointed out, it could be a bizarre campaign, couldn't it? With the way it's kind of we had that big break, then we had a few games, then we had no break, no pre-season, started again. If that impacts Liverpool further down the line, then someone else might have a chance. But I agree, based on what we've seen so far, you'd have to be back in Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, my logic behind this, you know, going into this season, Liverpool didn't really have any overriding weaknesses. Yet they have added more solutions than they already had. Obviously, Lovren and Lallana have left the club, but Thiago and Jota have been added. Thiago's going to offer, as we said last week, the control, specifically the ball progression from the centre of the park, as opposed to the flanks when Trent and Robertson get shut down. Jota offers that, you know, the option for 4-2-3-1 and the versatility in terms of, you know, say for example, Mane's injured or Mane needs a break or whatever, or Liverpool needs to make a sub to change the game on the 70th minute. Rather than bringing on Origi, you're bringing on Jota. Say for example, days earlier against Arsenal, he comes on. He has arguably 3 gilt-edged chances, scores one of them. Should score the earlier one. So it's a difference in standard there. Whereas if you look at City, for me, they had a massive weakness when it comes to defence. The centre of their defence for me is not dominant enough. For me, that's the most important quality for a centre-back at Liverpool and City. Are they dominant? And if the answer is no, they're probably going to struggle with defending 50 yards from goal, all kinds of open spaces against really quick attackers. And although they have addressed it by signing Ake and Dias, for me, they're not good enough to solve it. They're just going to cope similarly to how Stones and Otamendi and Garcia and Laporte have coped. Laporte, I think, copes the best because he's the most well-rounded. But other than Laporte, I don't think Diaz is that great. Personally, we probably should have got into his numbers for the show. Maybe we can do that next week. But I remember writing about him for Wolves last season. obviously I think he's meant his client.
Sure.
And his numbers weren't great. You know, I mean, defensive numbers you can question, but his numbers weren't that good. I think there was something like 35 centre backs in the Portuguese league. I think he was like 22nd for aerial duel success, and in the bottom 5 for defensive duel success in terms of percentage wins. So you know, it's a different game when you're playing for Guardiola, and he look good on the ball and all that sort of stuff. But Liverpool finished 18 points ahead of this team last season. Liverpool have added Thiago and Jota. City finished 18 points behind. I think it was 18 or 17. And they've added Ake, Torres and Diaz. And they've lost David Silva, lost Otamendi, lost Sane. Still haven't replaced Company for me unless you're looking at Diaz or Ake, but different players for me. So just considering all that, I don't see how City have any different of a season that they did last year in terms of winning the odd game 7-0. And then when it comes to facing a team that can actually play, they get opened up.
Yeah.
As we saw against Leicester.
Yeah, I think Diaz for me just feels like a decent buy, but you wouldn't have really raised your eyebrow had he ended up making the move to Wolves. But, you know, if he would have signed for another top 6 club, he's not going to be a transformational signing. I felt like they would have really got the window right this, or at least closer this summer, because it was so clear what was wrong last year. I think had they done that, you know, I know it's a tough window with the pandemic, but had they done that, then I think they could have been up there again. But yeah, for me, I think, you know, 10 years ago, they might have won the league on the points tally they're probably going to get this year. I mean, what did they finish on last season? Was it
81?
81. So, I mean, that can deliver titles in years gone by, but we're in a different era with Liverpool at the moment.
Yeah, well, if you look at City there, maybe they finished 81 points. They've added Ake, Torres and Diaz. I think that pushes them up maybe to 85, at a push 90. I mean, it's Guardiola, so he could get 90 quite comfortably. You never know with him, I suppose. But in terms of Liverpool, I think Liverpool will breach 90 points again. To get 90 points, you need 30 wins and 8 losses. I think Liverpool will do that again. So I think for City to go for the league, you're looking at over 90 points. And I'm looking at the squad. As I said, I think it's virtually identical to last season, but with 2 centre-backs added who were both fragile when it comes to certain phases of play. So I don't see that much of a difference there.
Yeah, I also... I was going to say one more big point as well, is I think, you know, when you line up the best players from each side, there's very little to choose from them, but there's one big key difference between Liverpool's top players and City's. I mean, both sides are pretty much all top players, but the key difference is Liverpool's always seem to be available. You know, they're always playing week in, week out. If you think of some of City's best players, Aguero, injury prone, you know, Jesus, also often injury prone. And then you've got De Bruyne, unbelievable player, but he very rarely gives you 38 games over the season. And that also impacts it, because Laporte, I think, you know, Laporte's probably the second best central defender behind Van Dijk in the Premier League. But the problem is that he's not as available as Van Dijk.
Yeah, I saw a stat yesterday. I think it said something like Van Dijk has started. I think it was in the 90s, about 94 consecutive Premier League matches. Van Dijk has started. I think Laporte, I wrote a piece on him. Well, not on him. I wrote a piece on City, shared it on my Twitter if you want to read that this week. And I looked at Laporte's numbers. Laporte, since the start of last season, has played 31% of City's available league minutes. That's just not enough for your best centre-back at the club. And the only centre-back you could argue that can cope with the demands that Guardiola puts on the shoulders of his defenders. You know, he asks a lot of them. And the more you ask of players that aren't good enough, the more you're kind of showing the world their weaknesses as opposed to their strengths. So yeah, more business can be done in a week, in the 5 days, but it looks like City are done for the window. And I think my biggest surprise for it is just that I thought that with the last season being kind of embarrassing for them almost, I thought that they'd go in and just throw money at a short-term fix like a Koulibaly. Someone to just kind of get them back to a dominant level for another 2 seasons, for whatever it takes. The next one in line was supposedly, I think it was Jules Koundé, I think is how you say it.
Yeah.
At Sevilla. They didn't get him. So Diaz was like third choice.
I know, it's good, really.
No, and if he's third choice, he's clearly not the best availability, and they still paid something like 65 million for him.
Yeah, I felt very desperate, which is one thing you never feel like Liverpool are. No, you never feel like they're kind of panicking to get it over the line. Whereas with them, I think they did.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to round up anyway. So, yeah, hopefully the audio's been good for this episode. It will be good moving forward. And next week, we'll probably touch on a little bit of the business that gets done in the final week. And then we'll look ahead. In fact, we'll probably do a Q&A next week because we haven't done one for a while and it's the international break. So we'll look out for that one. But thanks for joining us anyway, Dave.
Cheers everyone.